does that every time.
All right, it's live. You good?
It didn't tag us.
This is a live episode of James texting, and no, I'm kidding.
Well, as soon as James is done, folks, we want to hear from you, and maybe you want to hear from us.
We could do a little dancing number to get things kicking off. You know, Carl.
I will do it.
Carl, let's see what you got.
You want me to?
Oh my God. Yeah, back it up a little bit. All right.
He won't be serious.
Now we have 0 viewers, so.
Oh
We
man.
chased them all away.
You killed it. You killed it. You killed it.
He won't be serious. I'm serious and he's not.
I just shared it. It didn't go to mine, so. Alright, sorry guys. Hello everybody, my name is James Annitto, and this is Carl Johnson. We are doing Demonology, and our topic of discussion tonight is demons versus negative spirits. Sounds like they're going to be in a fight tonight, but that's not the case. We're going to talk about the differences and maybe some of the similarities between demonic entities and what we call negative or malevolent spirits.
It's going to be a challenge because it can be initially a very subtle difference. How do you define a malicious spirit, a negative spirit, from what you would classify as a demon, a whole different category? You know, but there are differences, profound differences.
Yes.
We're going to try and explore those tonight.
Yes, we are. And we're also going to take some questions. And as for the people that are watching tonight, if you also want to ask questions, but please also share for us, because the more shares we get, the more interactivity we get with the viewers, and the more educational it is for the people that are asking questions, and maybe somebody that hasn't watched us before be experiencing dual demonology for the first
It's
time.
our unique approach, or approaches, because there are 2 of us.
Definitely. So if you want to start off tonight, Carl?
Okay, well, there are times that we are contacted by persons that want their issue resolved. They'll say their house has some infestation, some wicked spirit, or perhaps they feel they are haunted by this spirit. It's easy to jump to the conclusion that it's demonic, you know, because it's negative, it's not convenient, so it has to be demonic, but not always. Because sometimes it's a human-generated spirit. And spirit is a spirit of something disembodied, something generally unseen. But sometimes they evince themselves, and the criteria I cite is that a human spirit is a projection. It goes about its business. It's not usually harmful, but it could be wanting attention. You know, it's drawing attention to itself through activity, maybe moving things around. And of course, oh, we have a demon in our house. No, not necessarily, because if it's demonic, an inhuman spirit, not human generated, but an inhuman spirit, it's soon going to evince itself. You may not find out right away, but after a time there's going to be such pronounced activity and a feeling, a gut feeling that it's something unwholesome. You will eventually know it's demonic, or we will.
Yeah, and there's also the processes too involved where you can see the differences in haunting as well, in variation of time.
Yeah.
It really is in demonic hauntings that we've talked about it over and over again, but we'll talk about it more, a little bit, much more detail now. Is demonic hauntings have that infestation stage, that oppression stage, and that possession stage. Those are the 3 primary that most people know of. Of course, there's little things like obsession and, of course, perfect possession,
Yes.
transient possession. But I think if you look at the negative spirit, and like you said, it is a projection of human once they're adored. They still believe they live. And they could be negative in mindset, personality, characteristics.
Just as there were negative people in life,
Yes.
that can carry over.
Definitely. So, but that scales differently. The haunting scales differently to a person. Scales differently to the environment, how it feels. Because with the negative spirit is going to be negative because it was negative in life. And maybe it's very territorial, maybe it was negative in life, they think it's still their homestead. So let's take it in a home situation. Their homestead is haunted, these people that live there, by something that is of a negative human spirit. And it negatively backlashes because it is that spirit's domain. and it negatively affects the people that are there, either by doing negative things like punching, scratching, forces of pure fear. Maybe it'll echo a lot of things like religious items being affected, or certain things being said, maybe like a demonic name. But the negative spirit is going to interact differently than the steps of it.
And that's the key word, there, interact with the people in the home, in the dwelling. I think generally a human haunting, the ghost per se, is going to be more static and more consistent in what it does.
But isn't there a difference between a spirit and a ghost in theory?
Well, it's nomenclature. I mean, the spirit, the umbrella term is a spirit, something disembodied that has some kind of personality to it, that appears and disappears, makes its presence known, and then recedes. So a ghost is more like you think of a person who died and they're still in the house and they're coming back.
Like a residual haunting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we don't know if that's the person who died and it's coming back.
Yes.
We really don't understand what they are.
Which brings us back to the point. So how do you know what you're dealing with sometimes?
Well, that's just it. Of course, some people contend, with reason, that all spirits are actually demonic. And if they seem to be your Uncle Louie or some departed loved one, then they're posing as that person.
It's a manipulative factor. It's a manipulative thing.
Yeah, but well, that provides people with an answer, you see.
Yeah.
Because how can these things exist? God should not allow spirits to dwell and be, trapped on the earth, become earthbound. You can support biblically that spirits are, would be demonic, like minions, posing as one's living people. But you can give a case biblically through Scripture. You can also support that spirits do manifest.
Well, of course,
It's interpretation. It's
and I think that falls back.
exegeting.
I think that falls back to the misunderstanding of what, especially with people, teens, or even somebody that lives in that dwelling, truly misunderstands what they're dealing with, and that goes back to what you just said. There are specific things out there people misunderstand, saying all spirits are demonic, or that you have to be wary of manipulative activity.
Well, you always have to be wary anyway, whatever you're dealing with, because you don't know first.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, especially if one's open to it and influenced and susceptible to that. But I think if it is a demonic spirit, you give it a few days, maybe weeks, but it won't take too long before you're pretty certain. If you're experienced with such matters, you know that it's something inhuman, not of this world, was not once a living person. And they do have an agenda, and they become progressively worse. A typical scenario, which I've encountered, I'm sure you've heard of and may have encountered, is that a child is talking to an imaginary friend. It can be a little boy that comes to see her, or a nice man that comes to visit in the room, or the happy lady, the friendly lady. And I dealt with a case like this in Brooklyn, New York, and been told the lady smiled at the subject. The little girl said that she was 14 years old. Well, actually, this started when she was 11 and went on for several years. And by the time she was, say, 13, she was saying, "This lady who sees me, she's smiling, but it's not a good smile anymore. She has pointed teeth and she looks mean." So that spirit,
Started to change.
Yeah, started to change.
And is it in truth? I've experienced this, not so subtly. Like there was not characteristics, but there was form. Isn't it also true for the people that are listening that a demonic entity, an appearance of a human apparition, there's going to be disfigurement. There's going to be something that is.
There's something wrong. There's something off kilter. Like the child wouldn't have known.
Because they're so innocent.
Yeah.
There's
Something's off.
Yeah.
What happens a lot of times with these spirits is that the eyes are different. There's no sclera, there's no whites to the eyes. But you and I are called in when the adults start seeing the spirit.
So that gets a little bit more that gets a little bit more than a hairy situation, because if children have very imaginative minds, we understand that. But so it's
you expect a child to be imaginative, but the adults are not seeing things.
Yes.
So there's corroboration there, and also the adult is seeing what the child said they saw. So something's up. We just have to determine, or try to determine what it is. We're the experts in things you can't know.
Yeah,
I know very little about.
I believe we have a question, Carl.
Yes, I see.
We do. We have Andrew. He always has great questions. He wants to know if people who are psychic mediums, whenever they go to these cases, should they be more careful getting into a haunting if they thought it was a human spirit but then find out it was not human?
Absolutely, because by the very nature of their gift, what they do, they're more susceptible. They're more vulnerable. They have to build up their own defenses, which I'm sure they learned to do to some degree, their own psychic antibodies.
Yep.
But yeah, they have to be especially careful because what is a magnet to a demonic spirit is when someone can see them and recognize them. They retreat from that, but if somebody is
But
from
they also
that,
target them too.
yeah, they can conversely
them.
come.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. They have to take special precautions. If they even want to go into that
Oh, yeah.
environment, they have to be, which they can be useful
Yeah.
in such an investigation and intervention. Yeah, put up your shields, whatever works for you to keep you distance and protect you, so you're not too involved.
I think also, like Carl said, they have to be careful, but also in the same token, you have to make sure. Now, I use psychic mediums, I use all different kinds of avenues and things to try to dissect the case. But one thing that you also have to understand too is on how you handle a case to that magnitude. You want to go in there with a neutral mindset. So you want a psychic medium in that same mindset. So you want to get somebody that you know you have worked with before, because you don't want to put somebody in the wrong boat, but you also don't want to tell a psychic medium what they're about to get into, where they're going, because when you start doing and giving them that information of what they could be dealing with, what they're dealing with, where we're going, you start clouding their judgment, you start clouding their opinion, and you don't want to do that. You want a clear-cut opinion when you bring something like that, because you don't want to intrude into their brain and say this is what's happening, and that's what they do.
Right, they should make their own evaluation,
Yeah.
especially if they have that gift, propensity for seeing spirits. And generally, a person is psychically gifted, if it's too overwhelming, they say, I've got to get out of here, at least for a while.
Yeah.
I have to go to the car, I have to chill for a while, I have to remove myself from it, and then they build up their strength, their resistance again. So they kind of know when to back off.
Yeah.
They've been at it for a
Yeah.
while.
But you want to be careful on who you bring, because they might not.
Okay.
You know, you
Always be careful
Yeah, those are-
who you're working with.
No more questions?
Well, I want to say hello to some of the people that have tuned in to
course.
listen to you guys tonight. Chris Sanders, Jody Nettles joined in. Mike Rick Secca, hi Mike.
Everybody, hi Mike.
Hey guys.
Scrolling down a little bit.
Of course, we have Ed with us.
Yes, Ed has come back to ask
Ubiquitous
questions.
Ed.
Melanie,
Reverend Ed.
Athena, Andrew, of course, just asked you a question.
Mhm.
Diane, Donna Mercia Holland, Trisha Coyne.
That's my
Welcome,
sister.
everybody.
Who's actually on today.
Welcome,
Oh, nice.
and please guys, if you could like, share this video, the more people that we have, the more ability of questions that we get, and hopefully we
We
can
got a more
answer.
variety of questions that we can field and hopefully try to answer. As I was saying, we're kind of known as the experts in some circles, but we're experts in basically the unknowable. We
So
try
does that
to.
make us experts?
No, it takes our expertise away from us, actually. Yeah. But we're humble about that.
We are.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so Carl, so you talked about Brooklyn, and this little girl seeing,
Yeah, that's I would call it a classic case. Every situation is different, unique as the people, the families are unique. But yeah, what do you want to ask me about that?
so I'm gonna ask a question for you, and of course I'll answer my part of it.
Yes.
But if there was one thing that we haven't talked about yet that would automatically give you the feeling that it was demonic, what would that one thing be that would turn you to that tipping point?
I'll say two things. One of the subjects, she wasn't living in that house, but she had been brought up in that house. As we were on our way over there from Rhode Island to Brooklyn, New York, she wore a crucifix, and it was pulled off her neck. Went to the floor, she showed us it. I believe her, just pulled off. And as soon as we were going up into the steps, it was like, I don't know if I can get through the door. I don't know why. I mean, of course I did, but something is blocking my way. It looks dark in there. I'm having trouble entering this room. Just something foreboding. That's very, I want to say it's very, psychosomatic in a way. And it was very subjective an experience, but it's like, something's up here. I feel it, I mean, I'm not going to show it to people, but I think I have to make some effort to go into this house. It's like I'm pushing through something. There's a thickness in the air.
Yeah, I know we have a question, but I just want to go over one thing. I don't really talk about it much because it was definitely an eye-opening experience for me. I dealt with the case a long time ago with a family in a house that I've never been. Of course, this was in Massachusetts. And basically, I don't really dream much. I don't really have nightmares much either.
You're fortunate that way.
And
I don't sleep much, so be that.
one of the things that really tipped me to the point of understanding what I could be dealing with was that, remember, I've only spoken to these people through email and through
Right.
phone conversation. I've never seen their faces. I've never seen the house. I didn't do Google Maps it. I didn't look up their house at all. But when I started getting involved in that case, I had a very prolific nightmare. And this prolific nightmare really followed me to this day. And sometimes it gives me the chills. But I had this nightmare of me driving to these people's house, me meeting the family, me seeing the house, and then, of course, this has never happened, but I murdered every single one of the members of that family.
Wow.
And when I got to that house, and I seen the family.
We're still talking about dreams.
Yes.
Right? You know,
But the house was the same as my nightmare, and the
Isn't that
family
something, huh?
was the same as the
The difference?
nightmare. And I've never seen that house, I've never seen that family before. And I knew, especially once I hit that land, I knew what I was doing.
doesn't that suggest demonic?
Oh, definitely
Yeah,
does.
it's
Because a human spirit does not have power to persuade thoughts like that.
And even though you hadn't met these people, there's a principle called quantum entanglement, for
Mhm.
instance, where, particle will vibrate and a like particle at a distance, regardless of the distance is inconsequential, will vibrate in sync with that. It's maybe something along those
Yeah,
lines.
but it was a serious thing, and to be honest, I would have to say that was one of those cases.
That's very
It was
disturbing.
demonic.
So how did you feel when you got there? I mean,
It was I couldn't say scared because I tried not to hold any emotion anymore, especially.
maybe this got you used to it, you got a little immune.
But it definitely, when I seen the house and I seen every single member of the family, and it was very basically a spitting image to what I had a nightmare about.
Yeah.
It was kind of eye-opening, and it really did take my breath away.
I think it somehow prepared you. I think that series of dreams, those proliferate dreams that you had.
But thankfully, I did not kill that family.
Well, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation now, or it's very frank of you to admit it.
No, that was my experience.
That's something, yeah. That is something. I think it prepared you for that case, built up some strength
We
in
had,
your
we had
system.
a question?
Yeah, Ed was wanting to know if you've ever had someone go into a demonic trance on a case.
Like a transient possession? Like what is that?
Phrase it that way, I think.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
definitely.
that.
I think transient possession is, when it comes to possession, is more so the case in a transient format. The entity comes and goes based upon the person's free will and where it's at and the power of that spirit. So yeah, I've seen what you would call maybe a demonic trance, but I've also seen what you would, in a negative spirit as well. I've seen people unknowing or unwillingly allow spirit to intercede into them
Yeah.
and communicate through them. But also something that most people understand, it's called channeling. And some people can channel purposely for something to speak through them, or unpurposely allow themselves to channel and allow a negative spirit to talk through them.
Well, I did something like that when
Yeah.
I was in Harrisville last year. The Harrisville
Yeah.
house. I allowed it to speak through me. I felt compelled. Not forced, but I felt compelled to let this thing voice itself. I think it was the house's own personality that is developed and evinces,
Yeah.
speaking through me.
But yeah, I've seen transient possession, and
You have seen that.
and you have too, right?
Yes.
So it is definitely first time you probably experienced it. I definitely assume it was an eye-opening experience, correct?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Well, there's a sudden change in the subject. Suddenly they're not even moving as they would.
Yeah.
There's something different.
And two, what also, and in that same token with the transient possession, is also, which is a key point, the difference between maybe a negative spirit channeling through somebody and a demonic entity possessing a person.
Find division between channeling and possession,
Possession.
which the possession indicates loss of control.
But also, too, what you can see within a person as well, when they're in a transient possession state compared to maybe a channeling, is a lot of people don't recognize this, or realize this, I should say, is that when you're dealing with the transient possession, that person that is under that influence will not look at you, they will right through you.
Oh yeah, good point.
And a person that is channeling, that spirit actually has a good chance of looking at you. So there's also that difference too. Usually that most of the time that person under transient possession, they will look right through you.
Right.
They won't look into your eyes. then you can feel that feeling too. Have you had that? You
Yes,
feel that?
yes, I have.
It's a sickening feeling. Like they're just like looking right through you. They know.
You feel very vulnerable
Yeah,
at that stage.
yes. We have a question.
Question is from Sheila. If a client that is diagnosed with bipolar, the symptoms associated with bipolar are similar to a possession, what is your advice on what our team as paranormal investigators should look for to differentiate the bipolar versus possession?
Again, it's going to be vague. You can't fully differentiate at certain stages. Medical evaluation has to precede the paranormal intervention, but it's still going to be vague. You treat it as if it is an invasive presence of personality. But you've always got to be cognizant that this person does have a medical malady, psychological malady. And it's prone to that, it's biochemical, it's brain chemistry. But, there should be rules against that, that if somebody has a mental imbalance, which is not uncommon in bipolarism, if somebody has...
Should be affected.
Yeah, they should not be affected,
Yeah.
and yet they are.
Yeah,
The most vulnerable people usually are.
yeah.
It goes in tandem with bipolarism, sometimes possession will, but you cannot, conversely, you can't jump to conclusions and say, just because somebody seems to be, showing a different side to themselves or a different personality, that's possession. But if you observe it carefully, you can tell subtle differences. You can tell when invasive spirit is starting to take over.
But I also do think too, if you're dealing with somebody, and this is not a true a very accurate statistic. This is very close in the ballpark. This is for people that are tech savvy and want to research this. Demonic possession and demonic infestation and all that is rare. But we got to remember, I believe last time I checked, there's only like 20% of the country that is affected by bipolar 1 or 2. 20% of people in America, if not lower. So that's a low number too of people that actually are truly dealing with bipolar, because it's really not diagnosed as thoughtful as you think it is. It is rare. It is really rare people are diagnosed with it. So
It's bandied around though a lot.
It is.
Bipolarism
It is.
Common
It's-
self-diagnosis.
it's as common self-diagnosis,
Yeah.
so like demonic possession is as well. But
It's hard to cite criteria for this. You pretty much have to be there
Yeah.
with the person, with the subject, and observe them, and look for those subtle nuances, those changes in their demeanor when they're becoming.
But if you do feel like somebody has a mental illness, or they come out and say they do, because one of your criteria when you sit down with people is you should ask them if they have any issues. They see a therapist or psychiatrist.
Yeah, these are addressed in the interview process.
If they take any medication, and you distinguish this, because if they do have bipolar, if they really have been diagnosed with bipolar, schizophrenia, or any of these diseases or ailments, you should be in constant contact with their doctor. I, on many cases, have been in constant contact with somebody's therapist. You keep in constant contact with that person that deals with that issue.
You observe, you take notes,
And you
document.
you keep in constant contact so that you're not overstepping your boundaries with something like a medical disorder. And you stay in your lane. You allow the other medical professional that should be dealing with that stuff, to handle that stuff. Because if, let's say, somebody does have bipolar, they take their medication and they're still dealing with stuff, this is stuff that can be talked to their doctor about. They're taking their medication, but they're not taking
If the physician is willing to communicate with the
which most
the
of them are.
demonologist.
Which most of them are.
Yes.
Some of them are mindful. Some of them aren't. But that's also when you do your due diligence, maybe you can get in contact with somebody that is more open about it as well, having to speak to that person. So there's so many things that you can do to get involved in that situation. But dealing with people with medical issues is you have to wear your kids' gloves. You have to wear your helmet. You have to be careful because there's liabilities to it.
See, we have another question coming in.
You've already answered Christine Parsons. She wanted to know what the actual percentage of demonic cases, and you said it was rare. But Jody Nettles also wants to know what's the best way to protect yourself.
First, I have my own personal statistics. Even though I said rare, I have my own personal statistics on how many cases I've done in somewhat of guesstimation based upon my case files in my file cabinet. But anywhere from the 400 range, that roughly, I can only say maybe 5 to 7 cases were demonic. 5 cases that I can quote unquote say I knew what I dealt with. 3 of those were possession. And I say 5 to 7, 2 other cases that to this day I still, once in a while, listen to the audio, review the case file, because there's some cases that I've done, even though they were kind of completed or walked away from, there's still sometimes questions, and I think that should be something that people always do, always go back and review their previous cases, because things have advanced and ideologies have changed. So, you know, that's my statistic on why I call it rare. I've done this for 15 years now in some capacity, and that's only how many times I've ever come across it.
Indefinites are hard to establish. You know what I mean, no matter what overt paranormal activity is manifested, then not all medical professionals are going to look at that and say it has a spiritual aspect. They're going to see the whole thing, the clinical, the psychological. You know? And by their perspective, they're right. But it's not always so easy to define. Yes, you know.
Well, we didn't answer the second part of that question. As far as protection.
Oh yes, a good point. I want to
think,
address that.
I think, you know, I'm not wearing my St. Benedict's crucifix right now. I don't have my keys, apologize. But on my keys, I have St. Benedict's medal on my key. There's certain medals like that you can wear, or something that follows suit with your belief system, because it's a positive token that reinforces your beliefs. But I think truly the biggest thing, besides faith, because faith is a very important thing, we have a part of our brain that is faith component. If you look at the structure of your brain, faith is one of those structures. So faith is powerful.
That's been borne out, and you know, Michael Persinger's helmet, you know, could activate the brain section, the response to faith, the God helmet, they call it, you know.
But that same token too, I think your positivity, like when you're involved in those situations, you have to be very positive. You have to be well-grounded. You have to not have any outside interference in your life being affecting to you at that point in time, because then you bring your baggage on with you, and that baggage is not good in a healthy standard, because if you bring your baggage and you're dealing with something demonic,
There's nothing that could ever, be perfectly prepared
it's
for
not,
something.
yeah. But you want to, if you're dealing with a death, or you're dealing with some sort of divorce or breakup or something like that, you can always postpone instead of putting other people in danger or putting yourself in danger when you're not in 100% mentality.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And we can think of it this way too, two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. If one is filled with the Holy Spirit, then there won't be room for a demonic creation.
So faith's powerful.
Yeah.
Faith's powerful.
Yeah.
Everything's
benefit.
Everything's important within that situation.
Another question.
Trish wants to know if there's a reason why these dark entities target certain people or target people at all.
Dark entities as demons or negative spirits?
I think negative spirits is what she was meaning. She didn't say demonic. She said dark entities.
Do you want to answer that one first?
So if it's demonic, that's pretty much their job description.
It's their target. They already have a target.
Yeah. But a negative spirit, because it gives them substantiation, it feeds them. If they are interacting with a living person, the spirit is static, the living person is not. The living person will fluctuate in their emotions and their energy levels. So you got someone that's going to feed that thing and perpetuate its existence in a way. They're going to, like through its fear, through its fascination with the spirit, the living person is going to give strength to that less substantial being, the ghost or the spirit. It's symbiotic. One feeds off the other.
Yeah, I think that falls
The
in.
ghost needs to be fed.
Yeah, I think that falls in the same token as well. And, this is my opinion, of course. I've been to a lot of these locations. A lot of these locations that are quote unquote haunted by demons. I've been to these locations, and I've come to the realization back to the same. Your mindset is a powerful tool when you're dealing with investigations or even dealing with the demonic. But in that same token, what Carl said, if you go to a location, you have a negative mindset, the laws of attraction apply.
Yeah.
And something negative that is there is going to attract, it's going to want to feed off that negativity because it's empowerment to them. It really is, because you draw them, and that's how attachments happen. Wrong place, wrong time kind of thing. Or you bring it upon yourself because you have that mindset.
James,
You're provoked.
if you ever had an attachment.
I have.
You have, yeah.
Yes, and that was because of ego. I allowed it to happen because of ego. Because I wasn't in the right mindset. I thought I was untouchable. I thought nothing could touch me in doing what I do. thought God was on my left and right shoulder, and I put my guard down, and I was able to be affected by something for a short period of time. And fortunately, because I'm in this field and I have enough people surrounding me, enough people told me, James, you're not right, this is what you feel on you. And okay, maybe one person tells you that, you're like,
Yeah.
alright, bull crap, you're all paranormal. But when you're like 10 people of said so abilities say something to you, then you kind of eye open, saying, oh well, that sucks. But then I realized too what I did wrong, but it wasn't demonic, it was negative.
That's
I was
what
in
I was gonna ask you
yeah,
about,
I was in a negative mindset. I was also egotistical, which is not, there is good ego and there is bad ego, but it was bad ego. I thought it was untouchable, and I allowed myself to be targeted because of that.
You became all the stronger because of it, because you learned.
Oh yeah,
from that.
yeah, definitely. Ego is not, bad ego is definitely not a good thing to have, not a good mindset to have when you're in those situations. Because you're not untouchable at any moment in time.
No.
It's the unknown. You don't, like in the same token, you don't necessarily know what you're dealing with. So you could be dealing with something very severe, what we would call demonic, and if I let my guard down in a split second, it could have been a lot worse of a situation. Instead of me realizing it and me getting through that process, it could have been a longer road, a longer process because of my negligence.
But you realized early on what it was. what the flaw was.
Thankfully to my friends and other associates.
Yeah. They say if you've got 3 people telling you something, people you respect, that you should really listen to that, even if you don't initially
Yes.
agree with it. Do you have another question?
We do have a question. Where'd it go? If someone is possessed, does the demon know the unconfessed sin?
Ooh.
That's a good one.
Because they could make use of that.
I would say short and sweet because that is hard. But the one thing that is very similar in most demonic cases, what I've experienced, and also what is in literature and what other demonologists have come across, and of course clergy members, is that that demonic entity does know thought in some capacity, and they do know what you did. So, like, let's say in a case like that person killed somebody, right? And that demonic entity might use that as leverage to twist and cause mayhem with the group setting. Hell, even sometimes priests, when they're involved in exorcism, or even demonologists or people that are ministers, they're doing a ritual expulsion over the said person. The demonic entity will say something like, especially if they're priests, and I don't say this to be mean, but they might say something that they did wrong, or especially if they're in celibacy, they might have slept with a woman, or if it was a minister, they might have killed someone in a car crash and they overcame that, did their time, or didn't turn themselves in, or they did overcome it and they did their time and they became a minister. But those things of the echoes of your past and the negative circumstance will come to the forefront because they want to twist everything negative. They want everybody to turn against each other. And I did a case where we in my opinion, we were successful, even though unfortunately it wasn't, and that I found out to be, but it twisted a bunch of us. It made all the people that were circles of friends in that, and they started attacking each other, and eventually things simmered out. But that circle of friends was no longer a circle of friends because whatever we had dealt with had basically annihilated that friendship because of our
Repercussions,
repercussions. So in that same stance too, those things can happen.
Also, let me point out about the unconfessed sin. The sinner knows the sin, and therefore is vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if they're trying to suppress it. Doesn't want his or her mind read.
Yeah, it's going to come
Doesn't
out.
want to confess it at that
It's a
time.
weakness.
So, but that's a lodestone. That's a weight for me.
Yeah, and it's definitely used properly in manipulated
A
ways.
lodestone for negative.
Yeah,
influences.
definitely.
We don't currently have another question, but Ed was talking about possessions happening in degrees of permission, if you guys want to elaborate on that.
Like we said, like I said, of course, last week when we talked about possession, I was at the week before. Basically, for possession to occur, your free will has to be broken down. There has to be an invitation or permission in some capacity. for that demonic entity to overstep its
Especially if
will.
the subject is exhausted and tired of resisting.
Yeah, it could be simply, it could be, even they might not necessarily know it. A lot of the times they don't necessarily know they are possessed. And especially in earlier situations, time that's a loss of time, they think it could be a health issue. They don't know what's going on. So that's definitely a possibility,
Yeah.
So,
Well, they say for any, like you were pointing out, that for any type of possession, there has to be some type of invitation, and that may be a very subtle invitation, like, I give up, I'm losing my faith, I forget, I give up.
and that's just enough
I'm tired of
permission.
being ill, or I'm tired of struggling against this invasive entity,
Yeah, because you lose your free will, you lose your will to live.
But if it's just normal, like unacceptable and normal human weakness, the person will recover from that.
Yeah, and it's similar in a negative spirit as well. And where I said unallowable channeling, you could also say something along the lines, and that negative spirit that is attached to you in some way could also affect you in motor skill wise, vocally, and they sometimes can also speak, because in that same token, you gave permission. So
Right, when you say unallowable channeling, you mean something that's like taken over, like pushing.
A trance, yeah, sure. Yeah, you're in a trance-like state, yeah. It pushes the ability for you to speak vocally in your personality, and that the spirit is able to speak through you. Because you don't believe, have you not come across that before?
Sure.
Sometime?
Oh, yeah.
And it emphatically wasn't demonic entity in quality?
Well, it depends, because I've been at a seance many years ago where something came through the person, and I don't think it was demonic. But the person was, welcoming a lot. After all, we were at a seance, so
Yeah.
somebody, you would expect somebody to start channeling or speaking in different
But
ways, another personality.
But in that same token, though, let's say if they do have an attachment, and they do say, "Oh, you can speak for me,"
And they probably shouldn't be at the seance.
well, no, but like, let's say they don't say it. They don't say it in a want. Like they give up.
Yeah.
In that same token, I think it's a lot rarer, because I think a demonic entity is a millennia older, and that they're not work physical bodies. I guess in a way they say they deal with their surroundings. They deal with the things they can do differently than maybe in spirit.
Right.
Which they
If you were going to have a channeling session like that, or a seance, you would expect a human spirit to come through, and that's what
Hopefully.
But every once in a while, something a little heavier comes through. But then, that usually ends the seance, because people are aware of it, just don't want to do it.
On that note, Mandy was she was curious. She was wanting to know some more about demonic attachment versus possession.
It would be demonic.
Attachment, demonic attachment, how would you define that?
I really want to define. I want to use attachment in the case and scenario of a demonic. I would use that more so of the spirit. I know some people say, well, how does the demonic come home with you? Well, I think they work in a different formula. I don't know if they attach to, they infest. They don't necessarily target a specific individual first in most cases. They do, there has been cases of it. But usually it starts off in a process where it's affecting the full home.
Right.
Then the target is assimilated from that point.
A major difference would be that a ghostly attachment spirit, it's just going to be that. It's going to come along for the ride. You get some low-grade manifestations in the home sometimes. But demonic entity wants to infiltrate, and take over, doesn't want to leave.
Yeah, so.
I've never known of an attachment to be as strong as the original haunting of the source. They usually dissipate soon.
Yeah, they do.
Demonic one, I don't think you just carry one. The person has to be vulnerable, be penetrated to some degree to bring that into their home.
Yeah, and that's why we say northern state. And we're not necessarily saying that a demonic entity can't initially start a obsession or oppression stages, because that's a possibility, especially if the need and want is there for it. But most of the case in time, it starts as an infestation, as an infiltration, because it doesn't know the target yet. Or if it does, there could be a possibility of changing target depending on if the demonic entity finds a person that they can infiltrate easier and faster.
We have a cheerleader here, and that indicates that we have a question.
Donna asks if black-eyed
Oh,
children are
yeah.
demonic entities.
You called it. You knew it was coming.
I had a feeling somebody was going to ask us.
You did
about
say that,
black-eyed
you did say
children.
that.
Well, black-eyed children are not negative spirits in the sense we're speaking, in the context we're referring to. They are their own thing. If they're not demonic, they should be. They're interdimensional beings. They come through and they really want to infiltrate. Classic case of a black-eyed children, they just don't have whites to their eyes. They come up to a car that's parked. Well, they'll come to your door and they need something. And they always know when you're alone, when you're not with people in the home, and you're the only one in the car. I haven't experienced it. I haven't even talked to somebody directly that experienced it. But that's when they'll come up and tap on your car window. Can you help us? We need a ride. They want to get in. They want to enter your house. They want to get into your vehicle. For all intents and purposes, they are demonic.
Yeah,
We don't understand them. It's a manifestation of demonic spirit, demonic presence.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier, how that with the Brooklyn story, how that apparition changed when it shut teeth.
Yes.
Sometimes that apparition, sometimes that manifestation is a child.
Yeah, typical criteria or sign of the demonic is the eyes change. They become very black because you can't see inside. You can't read that person. They're hidden. There's no soul there. So black-eyed children, I don't think we can understand the subtleties of them. It's just
I've never experienced it either, so.
I would treat them as demonic.
Yeah.
It means treat them in avoid.
Yeah, be very cautious. Be very cautious. I've never dealt with it, so I cannot get firsthand.
There's just something
experience
super creepy about that because it always happens at night when the person is by themselves, and these beings approach them in the form of children. Now, what they are, what they want, suppose you let them in, what happens? Suppose you let them in your house, suppose you let them in the car. Do you vanish? Do they take you someplace? Do you become possessed? I don't know. I don't know of any aftermath story. I just know of people who have resisted them.
Same.
Yeah, so they're definitely on the demonic side.
Yeah.
However we call, whatever we call them, we just don't have more terminology. Like with a shadow person, are they demonic? I don't know. I don't think so, but black-eyed children definitely are something to be wary of.
And that will fall in the same line with.
I almost wish I could see one so I could examine it, so I could talk about it, see what the experience was like. Creepy stuff.
Yeah, it's very important, and it's really, I say it in a bad way, but it's important for us in a way to deal with this,
Yeah.
experience it, because in a way, even though the paranormal is not fact, and there's many different ideologies and theories that encompass what the paranormal is, but still it is a very important thing for, especially with people like us, that deal with those kind of hauntings and
Right.
situations, to experience it, because having a first-hand personal experience about it definitely helps in understanding the situations that we get involved with sometimes. Because even though a case, let's say, and this goes back to the demonic versus negative spirits, if you go to a case and you handle a child with black eyes, you've dealt with that experience. So if you come across another case, even though I think
You
everything
can advise to some degree. You can
Advise
say,
to some
I've
degree.
experienced this, yeah.
Thanks.
I'd like to ask our friend Reverend Ed Broderick what he thinks of the black-eyed children.
Ed was
Have you
actually-
heard of that?
He just commented. He said
Or
that
is
he's.
that a coincidence?
He doesn't mention he's seen the black-eyed children, but he has had demons use a childlike voice when
Yeah.
speaking through
Yeah,
people.
they can do that. They can, again, no rules.
Almost
Yeah.
taunting, I would think.
And two
Sounds like
also is, I don't want to use the word terminology. So, when you're saying it's octaves, right? Is
Yeah.
that the correct term?
Well, their propensity for emulating vocal tones,
Yeah.
coming out with different voices.
So,
Sure, they can mock living people and sound like them.
so basically also, because I really want to get back to the point of our discussion tonight, is in a demonic situation when somebody's possessed, and of course this is going to be way different than if the negative spirits involved, that possessed individual is going to either have a higher octave, different multiple voices within one voice. It is very well known Tibetan monks have one of the highest octave ranges in the world. And actually, nobody, even Freddie Mercury, can at that point get to the octave level of a Tibetan monk. But for videos that have been reviewed because there have been recordings of demonic, transit demonic possession happening and that entity speaking to the person, they have been dissected to realize that those octaves in some cases were higher than what a Tibetan monk can reach. And that in itself is mind-blowing because Tibetan monks are known for one of the highest ranges, but they have these recordings of these people under influence, and they're saying that these octaves are higher than that in some capacity. That's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah. People can do under these trance-like states. Yes,
Sorry, we have a question. You said at the same time, don't make coke.
Yeah.
Pinch, whatever.
Well, we still have to talk about, amongst ourselves,
Oh,
too,
yeah.
because it's interesting.
We love this stuff.
Yeah.
Melanie asks, can a negative attachment bounce to others in the same close area?
Yes, because I've seen it happen.
Yes, too. I also seen demonic. I've also seen a demonic case where this has happened, and also in the same token, why most priests have another priest during an exorcism is because in some capacity, that priest that is doing an exorcism, the entity might actually jump into that priest, and then another priest is there for that exorcism to be done by that priest. And that's why sometimes they work in two, because there's that danger where anytime that spirit or demonic entity could jump.
They'll jump from one substance to the other. They can.
I've seen a whole family. And then I did a deliverance over this one person, and then one of my team members started under influence, and I had to do a deliverance over that individual because I had jumped from that individual.
That's a very challenging situation, dude.
Oh, you're already tired after the first deliverance.
Yeah.
After the first deliverance, you're already tired. You just feel like crap because you just put everything into it, and then you have to jump to somebody else and do a deliverance over somebody else. It's very exhausting.
Spiritually, emotionally draining.
Keith says, is it true that only 1% of the paranormal is actually demonic?
1%. I would say only 1% of the stuff in this world is paranormal. I think 99% of the stuff that we deal with is natural occurrences, and then that 1% is preternatural. Because if everything was paranormal, then it wouldn't be paranormal, right?
Sometimes a psychological malady can create the paranormal. Like that house in Brooklyn I was talking about, with everything that was going on there, it was still, the paranormal activity was symptomatic of them underlying problems, unresolved conflicts. So yeah, you got different levels and all that, but it's just so easy to jump to the conclusion that it's something of supernatural nature because that answers questions. You may not have the right answers, but you've got answers.
Because a lot of times, and even though this is demonics versus negative spirits, the real caveat is that I really truly believe that most of the cases that I deal with are actually PK activity, poltergeist. People actually bring it upon themselves in some capacity.
Well, that's the thing. How can you say this isn't demonic? Look, my grandmother's picture flew off the mantle and all that, but they're creating that.
Yeah. If you have so much perception into something,
that's why the interview process is important. You try to get out to the underlying causes. You got to find out what started this in the first place to try and make it better to address that situation.
But that goes back to the same fruition, the same topic. If it is a poltergeist, if it's PK activity, can you normalize that as paranormal, or is that normality? Is that natural? Because that's a natural thing that's happening within our body that creates this source, right?
Preternatural. Yeah. There's a cause for it.
Yeah.
Something caused it.
Is it really beyond natural though? At that point, is it really
perfectly understood? Yeah. It's beyond normal bounds.
Yeah.
And criteria to be sure. Sometimes you have to.
I was playing devil's advocate there for a second. Because there are people that say that something like that, if it's generated by the mind, then it's a power of the mind. That means it's part of the naturalities of who we are.
Well, I think the mind always comes into it as far as generating some of this activity when somebody's under extreme duress. This output makes things happen.
Does that mean it's up to the person to cure themselves if it is something that is caused by their own psyche?
Yes and no. No, the person shouldn't have to do that on their own. No, you
Not
need
on
guidance.
their own, but it comes from them as opposed to coming from prayer and deliverance unto that person.
You got to remember that deliverance or exorcism is an invocation process. If you do a deliverance or exorcism on purpose, that person, and they don't invoke the Holy Spirit, then it just works to them. It's in the same token. I like to really relate this, and I believe your brother you have too, and this is where I've kind of gotten that concept as well. And a lot of the demonologists use this format is an intervention with someone that has a drug issue, right? If you're gonna intervene and do an intervention with this person, let's say that is like a deliverance, right? You speak all these words to them saying, this is what's happening, blah, 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 blah. But they go to rehab, they go through the intervention process, but they really don't want to get off the job. Guess what they're gonna do once they get off that bus when they get back home? They're gonna treat themselves with some heroin or something like that, and they're gonna do drugs again. So it's in that same process where if that person is going through that process, they're not willing to fight and they stay in that victim mentality, they might never ever get over it because they're not invoking the Holy Spirit, they're not invoking positivity. If they're not doing that invocation, they're not trying, then how are they overcome that?
That's why a subject who's in the throes of demonic possession cannot, or experiencing that, cannot totally rely on the exorcist, the people who are trying to help them and trying to invoke on their behalf. You can't just sit back and say this is going to resolve my problem. That's why
You need to want
That's why, like a couple of weeks later, the person when the blessing has been done of a house, the person would be saying, "Oh, it's come back, everything's happening."
because they didn't continue with what they were asked to do.
And it may take repeated sessions,
Of course.
interventions,
Of course.
But yeah, the person has to, in a sense, cure themselves. Not without guidance, not without prayerful intervention.
Definitely.
But do some introspection, do some soul searching, what do you want from this? What do you think caused it? What do you want to change in you? Meet me at least halfway, and we'll guide you. We'll do what we can.
And another way you can look at it too is, especially in the demonic sense, they're cancer. They're like cancer. It's very cancerous. So I know cancer can come back at any point in time when you're in remission. But one of the most important things too, once you beat cancer, is to keep healthy, keep your body in a good state, so that cancer cell doesn't reactivate and come back. So it's in that same token, you have to continue living a healthy lifestyle, a positive lifestyle, and of course you're going to probably hit your roadblocks because life's not perfect. We all go through ups and downs, but when you have that down, you want to try to get out of that down as soon as fast as possible and get in a better place because you've already been afflicted, and that possibility of being afflicted again is always there.
Yeah, so, like I said, come forward, meet me halfway if you can. See what works for you, what makes you feel a little better some days, you might other times, and we'll guide you, we'll try to pull you through. But you have to be cognizant of what you're attempting, to get better, to throw this influence off.
Definitely. Do we have any more questions?
Or should we end while we're going strong?
We don't have any more questions currently. Keith was saying that on the note where we were talking about the 1% paranormal is demonic, he was saying so it's more malevolent as a question.
More so, my opinion, like I said, most of the things that I experience are usually dealt with the people. And when I say when dealing with the people, it means that there is some want or need or some kind of situation where they're projecting the experience. But if I had to say out of that token, I would say a lot of the stuff that I deal with is malevolent spirit or negative spirit over demonic, definitely.
And generally, not always generally, those are easier to deal with. They dissipate. If you resist them, they go away faster. Would you say that? What do you think? I think the demonic is more tenacious, but rare.
I would say sometimes, to be honest, one of the worst cases that I ever dealt with actually was a gin case. Where the item was from overseas and the person stole it, didn't say anything about the item, and when they finally acknowledged that the item existed, and we were able to do a process of, ending the curse, because of basically allergens invoked through the process, is some sort of curse, some sort of process, then the activity stopped. But it took a long time for that process to end. But that was more so because of the person not being more proper.
Right.
But I sometimes do think that sometimes negative spirits are harder to deal with because in that same token, if they are a negative spirit, that means they have the same capacity of free will.
Right, they do, but I think they are responsive, more responsive to
Yeah.
the quelling process where you're diminishing their power. Yes, another question.
We do have a question from Mandy. She wants to know if it's possible that a demonic possession or demonic attachment could happen to a family, say for generations, where it sticks with that family.
So
Generational, like a generational curse.
All right, like, yeah. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
No, the more I learn, the more I think that is plausible. It shouldn't be, but sometimes the curse tends to carry on through successive generations. It can be broken at any time, but that family is more prone to it.
That is something I would agree on, because let's say if a ritual is done, and of course it's not all the time, but a blood ritual is done where this one person was, and these of course these are found in movies, so some of this ideology is from that standpoint, but this is also from literature as well. Well, let's say that person a long time ago did a blood ritual, and that person was overtaken by a spirit.
Yeah.
But or that demonic entity, but that demonic entity did not meet or get its demand that it wanted. There is definitely a big possibility that demonic entity would follow suit with the bloodline until it got what its demand was or what it wanted.
And how would you break that
has
curse
what's
then?
that?
How would you break that curse if it's a family curse and it's followed the generations? How would you go about ending that or breaking
Through
it?
volition, the people being affected have to decide, we have the power to stop this. This isn't going to go on ad infinitum through our successive family generations. We have to stop it. Maybe it's our destiny to stop this, to break this now. You can. Because a curse, it doesn't have that kind of strength when people are totally helpless against it.
Well, somebody once told me, and I really do believe in this, right? Everything is the power of the mind, of what we are capable of, and aka free will. If we put our mind to anything, anything's possible.
You decide
I really
to break
truly,
that
I really
curse.
truly believe that. A curse and a hex is basically something that if you believe in it, it's possible that it happens. So if you take that, if you take the substance out of it, you take that ability for it to affect you out of it, that doesn't mean that there won't be any repercussions from it or anything that deal with it. But if you stand,
And that's something very tough to do, to convince yourself that the curse line has been broken.
yeah,
And again, through prayerful intervention,
yeah.
and just going about your life in a positive fashion. But decide, I have the power to break this, it's not going to keep going.
Yeah, and I
You
don't
can do that.
And I don't mean to yet, I don't try to preach on Facebook, I don't try to preach on these topics, but I'll say it to somebody, and I really truly believe in this. If you really truly do believe in God, God's the most powerful thing, right? So just believe in God and believe in that power, that agape, the love, and that does help, and that goes back to the same token of faith. That
Ed
faith
was-
is very powerful.
Ed was just saying the same thing. He said if the person or family walks positively with God, then it's broken. It can be
Yes,
broken.
You can break it. If a curse was placed, it can be undone.
It's when you have
displaced.
Yeah, it's when you have doubts. It's when you have doubts, then
Doubts are hard to avoid, but
Yeah.
I think we should end now that we've done our hour, and we'll come back to see us next week.
Yeah, definitely. And for people that are wondering, I think, is it next weekend? No. Yeah, the following weekend, we're in Rochester, New York.
Oh, yeah,
Look at
a long
Firefest.
drive.
Long drive, but it's going to be a fun weekend. We are speaking on Sunday, but we are going to be there all weekend. The weekend after that, March 7th, we're going to be at the Lookout House in Pennsylvania. But also, for people that don't realize that are watching this video, for our March 7th event at the Lookout House in Pennsylvania near Gettysburg, we are also going to be at the grand reopening of the Gettysburg Ghost Exchange
That's the big one,
right before our event. It's going to be an awesome day. It's going to be
Yeah,
great
we're gonna
seeing
get
everyone.
busy.
We're going to be mingling a lot around. So
Check our sites, our Facebook pages, and, Demonologies page, get in touch with us, we'll remind you.
yeah, definitely. And if you are wanting a specific topic, please email Elise. Email
Yes,
one of
because
us.
we will talk about it.
Yeah.
Get it through, and we
I'll
might
post it
devote
right on
the
the
whole
Duo
talk
Demonology
to it, the whole
page.
discussion to that.
Yeah.
Because these are discussions, we're learning as we go along.
Definitely.
We don't have the definitive answer every time.
We don't.
We'll talk about it amongst ourselves, and we're hearing a lot of unique experiences and approaches.
And the cool thing too, to wrap it up, is that everybody in this field, in some capacity, even though there is a baseline of demonology,
Yeah.
we all have our different ideologies and theories and opinions because we all have our different backgrounds and experiences as well that formulate the ideas that we come forward with.
That's why there's always something to talk about.
It is. So, good night, everybody, and I hope to see you guys next week.
Thank you, good night, come back, see us next week.